Okay, my name is Emily McCarter, and I chose standardized tests as my final project. To start, tests are just tests that are administered and scored in a uniform manner and can be compared with scores of students in the same grade level. The goal is to show strengths and weaknesses, provide evidence for placement, and show progress. There's definitely mixed opinions on standardized tests, including in the collegiate world, as some universities have undone the requirement for SAT and ACT scores for admission. However, in more recent years, they're switching back to requiring it. There's also a heavy debate on standardized tests' ability to fully encapsulate one's intelligence due to several things, such as test anxiety and multiple intelligences. As for what I learned in class, I learned many things, mainly the aspects that go into scoring, such as norm group, which is the first group of people who take the test to set the basis for comparing scores. Then there's the different types of tests. There's norm reference test, which just compares scores to the norm group. And there's criterion reference test, which compare scores to criteria. We also learned the ways in which standardized tests are evaluated. So there's validity, which is just how accurate and appropriate the test is for the students. And that splits off into two parts: predictive validity, which is the test ability to predict future outcomes, and criterion validity, which is how appropriate the test is compared to criteria in place. The other way in which it's evaluated is reliability, which entails the consistency of scores. So there's two things: the retest reliability, which is the ability to make students take the test again, and it should produce a similar score, and alternate forms, which is the ability to give the test in different forms on two separate occasions, and they should produce similar scores. As for actually in class, I got a lot of insight into my peers' experience with standardized tests, how some really differed from my own and some were really similar. Most of the information stated in this section is from our textbook, and I thought the picture did a great job at kind of showing how norm-referenced tests work. As for information from news sources, the first article I found is about the effects of the No Child Left Behind Act and Every Student Succeeds Act. Both put heavy emphasis on standardized tests. In this, I found this quote. It says, "Although the No Child Left Behind Act goal was commendable, in application it created financial incentives that increased socioeconomic segregation and pushed low-performing students out of high-performing schools." This quote explains how, although this act had good intentions, it actually ended up causing problems for the students who could not keep up and are then moved to other schools, because this move will likely lead to even worse performance as they're in lesser performing schools. Some other information I found was from an article looking into the frequency of standardized tests in schools. They found that the average student in America's big city public schools takes some 112 mandatory standardized tests between pre-K and 12th grade. That's an average of 8 a year, the study says. That is just an astronomical number of tests taken throughout the year, which is supported by the information I learned in class about lessening the significance of these tests, because that amount is very excessive. And the citations are there. Okay, as for my personal experience, I learned that these tests do have a purpose other than making students feel bad. They can be incredibly useful in determining whether a student should continue to the next grade or determine whether they need remedial help in certain areas. I've always done pretty average on standardized tests, never exceptional, but not terrible either. I definitely get one perspective that these tests are really helpful in determining whether someone should advance to next grade. However, from the other perspective, I think colleges and school systems should ease up on the importance of these, as it's just not the full picture of a student's intelligence. And as the textbook kind of suggests, implementing performance assessments could be helpful. I've always found that in classes that did multiple kinds of assessments, such as Spanish, I achieved higher scores and was better judged. In Spanish, we had to do an oral assessment and a written one, and I just think that I was overall better judged. As for implications, as long as the test is reliable and valid, I think they're great. There is a misconception in place in regard to the socioeconomic status affecting test scores and success. However, Nathan Kunsel from this TED Talk explains how that is incorrect. Okay, he did a great job at explaining that, maybe. Okay. Other concerns I found were the issue of cultural bias within tests. In a study completed by K. Young and others, it was found that the differences in sentence structure and word meanings can have significant impact on test performance. This quote explains the need for change. It states, thus, tests must take into account students' way of knowing and demonstrating their knowledge through their use of language. So this quote is originally from Solano Flores and Trumbull, but it was quoted in K. Young's study. So to conclude, some people really love and think standardized tests are effective. Some people do not, but no matter what side you stand on with that, I think we can agree there's some problems to identify and definitely some use cases as well within standardized tests.